Let's talk Brexit now with Dominic Grieve, who's the former Attorney General, also Conservative MP for Beaconsfield, and a keen Remain campaigner. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Right, we're leaving International Men's Day aside. We've got a very, very busy week ahead when it comes to Brexit. Prime Minister's going out and about to sell her plan, talking to the CBI today. The Sherpas are all going to be meeting in Brussels. She's going to head off on Sunday to try and sign this deal away. Within the next week, there has to be a vote, a meaningful vote in Parliament on whether or not to accept this withdrawal agreement, the Brexit plan she's laid out. Meanwhile, 5 cabinet ministers who are Brexiteers are trying to get her to change it. And we've got the European Research Group led by the Eurosceptic Jacob Rees-Mogg trying to get 48 letters in for a letter of no confidence. Goodness me, and a very busy week, very busy fortnight ahead for the Prime Minister. Let's just go through some of the questions. Do you think that there will be a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister? Will those 48 letters be reached, and will she win that vote?
I have no idea whether they'll get 48 letters. If they do, I'm fairly confident that they will fail. And that she will survive it. I don't see how they're going to get 50% of the parliamentary party to support them. And I've always thought this was just a sign of complete desperation on their part and incomprehensible behaviour.
Why incomprehensible?
Because it's not going to make any difference. They blame the Prime Minister for the outcome of the negotiations, whereas the outcome of the negotiations were almost inevitable from the day they started. We've got a deal which is undoubtedly a poor deal in the sense that it is a second-rate relationship to remaining in the EU. But that was the sort of deal we were always likely to get because we were asking from the EU something which essentially they were not in a position to provide to us. We've always approached this negotiation on the basis that somehow we're a sovereign state and the EU's a sovereign state. It isn't. It's an international treaty organisation underpinned by a rather complicated rule book. And there are limits to the amount of flexibility it can show in any third country agreement, which is what we've been talking about. And on top of that, we have, in terms of withdrawal, issues like Northern Ireland, which were undoubtedly clear at the time of the referendum, but nobody was prepared to discuss them, and which, in fact, mean that the sort of relationship we're likely to have with the EU in future is bound to be complicated by that.
OK, well, you say that, look, it wouldn't make any difference who was negotiating this deal, whether it was the Prime Minister or anybody else. That's not what her last 2 Brexit secretaries have thought, David Davis and Dominic Raab. They've been very much of the view that actually there would have been far better ways of negotiating. They felt that they were doing well and that they were being undermined by her and her closest civil service advisor on this, Ollie Robbins, and that she's actually sold the country down the river and they could have got a better deal.
I've no idea. I'm not in government. I don't know what's been happening on a day-to-day basis. I find it somewhat extraordinary that a Secretary of State should say that he didn't know how the negotiations were proceeding and about to be concluded. In fact, I find it almost unbelievable.
But you seem to think that that's a fault of the Brexit Secretary as opposed to the Prime Minister who's excluding the person from doing their job.
I have no doubt that as this crisis has deepened over a 2-year period, Number 10 Downing Street and the Prime Minister have taken more and more power to the centre in trying to keep control of what has turned into a rather uncontrollable and dismal process. No doubt about that at all. But that said, if you're signed up in government and you're in the cabinet, then normally I would expect you to be able to share the documents and to know the direction of travel of this negotiation. I find it impossible to believe that the Secretaries of State for DEXU, whether it was David Davis or Dominic Raab, were not aware of the sort of direction in which this negotiation was going.
But they have said they were aware of the direction and were happy with what they were trying to negotiate, but felt that there were a second set of negotiations going on behind their back. It appears to be what they're saying. But let's talk about what happened.
Well, as I say, I mean, I can't. I wasn't present in government, so I can't comment on that. I could only express surprise.
But that would suggest that again, if someone else were doing the negotiation other than the Prime Minister and Ollie Robbins, who's one of the most Europhile civil servants ever to have been on the planet, that perhaps a different deal could have been reached. Now, I mean, this is going to be a day when we a rare note of agreement between us, Dominic, where you think this is worse than remaining in the EU, and I think this deal is worse than remaining in the EU.
Yes, we do agree on this.
It's nice to have one day when we agree.
It is a very poor agreement. I mean, but I'm afraid I do have a sense of inevitability about this. I mean, I've been forgive me, we've had previous conversations. I've been banging on about this over the months, that we were in a negotiation which is inevitably one-sided and which is not going to deliver the hoped-for expectations, particularly of hard Brexiters.
Okay.
The Brexit project, in my view, is fundamentally flawed.
Well, your
Your
solution to it being a very poor agreement is that we should remain in the EU. My solution is that we should leave with no deal, which I'm perfectly happy to do. And again, we're going to disagree on that. What do you think is the likely outcome, though? Because the Jeremy Corbyn even left the idea on the table of a possible second referendum in the future, but not now. There's lots of difficulties with the timing in terms of getting anything through in terms of legislation before March the 29th. Realistically, do you think that what the outcome is going to be now is that we will have that deal, as poor as it is, that we will have no deal, or that there will be a delay in triggering, or a delay in the end of the triggering of Article 50 and we'll actually not leave on March 29th? What's your best guess?
If the ERG stick to their present position, or at least some of them, and it seems to me unlikely that they will change it, but you've got to ask them, then I think it's unlikely that this deal is going to get approved by Parliament, although doubtless the government will do everything it can to try to persuade MPs to support it. If the deal does not meet with parliamentary approval, then clearly we have a major political crisis. And I'm not very sure how that will actually pan out. But as I don't think Labour are going to be able to secure a general election by tabling a motion of no confidence, I think that Parliament will have to take responsibility for this and decide whether it wishes to go back to the British public and say to them, do you want this deal or do you want to remain? I mean, it's a choice. And I suppose it's potentially possible that the ERG may also succeed in putting before the public, do you want to leave with no deal? But I have to say that leaving with no deal presents a number of problems. Firstly, for Parliament to do it would be, I think, fairly extraordinary. It is a chaotic process. It will undoubtedly lead to short and medium-term disruption to the lives of people in this country, and it's something which I don't think any responsible government would do. Secondly, if you were to go and put this to the public, what the government would actually be doing is putting to the public something that goes way beyond the original 2016 referendum result, because it would be saying that the government has decided it's happy to act unlawfully in respect of our other international relationships, and in particular, the one we have with Ireland, because it's not compatible with the Belfast Good Friday Agreement that we signed in 1998, which is a totally separate international treaty between the UK and Ireland and doesn't actually directly involve the EU at all. So we've got quite a big problem here. And I have to say, if I were Prime Minister, I would be most reluctant to rip up an international treaty, which is in fact the foundation of ending terrorism in Northern Ireland and bringing it a measure of peace.
But realistically, no one is intending to. They stated categorically putting a hard border. And we're told that it's the men in balaclavas with their guns will return if there is a hard border. For a start, we don't give in to terrorists. We don't make our international treaties based on that threat. For secondly, no one's going to put a hard border up. So the European Union has said categorically they weren't. The Irish has said they weren't. We said we won't. So it's not going to happen. So it's not an issue.
Well, I suspect that the government has been told very clearly by its own lawyers that to leave the EU in a manner to go, for example, to WTO, which places a legal obligation on the United Kingdom to operate a hard border with Northern Ireland, between Northern Ireland and Ireland, is in breach of our international legal obligations. We say Prime Ministers spend their time at the dispatch box saying, and they're right to do this, saying that the UK believes in the international rules-based system because we are underpinning it. We're the country that has produced more treaties than probably any other nation on planet Earth. And I just don't see a government in a cavalier way ripping that up. So, these are the reality checks that should have been made 2 years ago, indeed should have been explained to the public before we even had the referendum.
I think we all know that given that the European Union are able to fudge things like who joins the euro currency, letting countries like Greece and even France, who didn't reach the requirements in, I think fudges are nearly always what the EU manages to do when it wants to. Just my final question to you. Given that in 2016 people like me voted to leave and we wanted all the phrases that take back control of our money, our borders, our law, laws, our courts and the like. Given that we'd be spending in this deal £39 billion of taxpayers' money with nothing set in stone, nothing guaranteed behind, we'd still have to be covered by the European Court of Justice, still covered by large areas of EU law. We locked into the customs union without the ability to choose to leave unilaterally. The EU would get the final say. Can you live with the idea that would be in any way representative of what people voted for in 2016 by a majority of 52%?
I certainly think it's a very poor outcome. That's why I want to go back to the public and say, do you really want this?
And if the public came back and said they did?
Well, if they said they did, well, then that's that. I mean, it's over. As far as I'm concerned, I can only do my best as a parliamentarian to make sure that we try to take considered decisions. My opposition to this is that I agree with you. It is at great variance with the sort of nonsense that was being trumpeted, or the vision even that was being trumpeted by Brexiters at the time of the 2016 referendum.
I think it's exactly what we were told.
People are entitled to be deeply disappointed, and that's why I think we should be going back to them and saying, look, this is the deal that we've got. Is this what you really want? There are alternatives, and the alternative, the principal one, is remaining in the EU.
I would say the principal one was going ahead with the 2016 referendum result and leaving. But you see, we end on disagreement. We always do in the end.